Yes, questioner down here.
Is Cameron little more than a PR man?
Matthew.
Do you know, I think it's too large a question at this stage. I think he is a little more than a market man, and I'm still waiting to find out how much more than a market man he is, but he is at least a marketing man, there's no doubt about that.
Linda, you've been very quiet for the last 5 minutes.
No, I don't really have much to say about Cameron.
He's more than a PR man. Even a PR man is more than a PR man. But he's a PR man who showed very bad judgment in hiring Andy Coulson. I think if you'd asked any journalist, apart from those who work for News of the World, whether or not he should have a former News of the World editor in Downing Street, the answer would be no. So he's a PR man with a flaw.
Linda, you would like to come back, yes?
I would like to raise the question about whether the instatement or employment of Andy Coulson was entirely of his own volition, or whether it might have been suggested to him or foisted on him by others.
And by others, you mean?
I mean Murdoch.
Mr. Murdoch.
Yeah, that is what I mean.
No, it's just one of those conspiracy theories.
To return to Orwell's essay, it seems to me it has two subjects, and one it reflects his great concern with style, and of course he was a great stylist because he was so clear. And one of the suggestions he made for us all to try and be clear was never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you're used to seeing in print. And I would suggest, to get a little further than Tony Blair, that was yesterday. Today it's second chance, said 10 times. This, and the other subject of Orwell's essay, I think, is rather more complex, and he was struggling to come to terms with ideas which, since his writing, have been explored much more fully. And I'd commend, say, the work of Noam Chomsky, talking about managing consent, the way the media shapes what we can be interested in. And a fairly benign example of that recently, it seems to me, is the royal wedding. If you hadn't watched the television previously and read newspapers, would you really have felt involved in that? So the media shape our concerns, and are even doing this with the present crisis. And I think that gets close to answering the question that the previous question. That the media tell us what we can be interested in. And I think Orwell was struggling to express that in the 40s.
Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. What you have just heard is the classic left-wing view of the false consciousness of the proletariat. It is that the people can't really be trusted because the people have been misled. The people don't really know their own minds. So we must tell the people what their minds really ought to be.
I actually agree with you on this, and I'm dubious about Chomsky. I think that one of the really, really interesting phenomena of the last 10 or 15 years, and I really get this when I talk to my nephew who's 26, who grew up on Big Brother, is that they see the media in a much more three-dimensional way. And they realise, they view it ironically, I mean, they have a postmodern view of the media, which means that they see that in a way it's a joke. And there was a very interesting debate on Newsnight. I mean, if anyone saw the fantastic showdown between Steve Coogan and the former deputy news editor. Right, well, a bit later on in the programme, Boyd Hilton from Heat magazine said, look, what we do at Heat is we take all the elements of the tabloid press, like, oh look, she got cellulite, and we just remove what he called the faux right-wing moralising from that mix. We just take it away. We take away all the kind of, you know, the illegal immigrants give you cancer, and we just give people the enjoyable voyeurism, which they view as a comic. And I think Chomsky is too high-minded to understand that an awful lot of people are more knowing and have far more of a sense of humour than he believes.
As somebody who once studied linguistics, anything said by Chomsky is a no-no for me. But I would really like to revert to a point made by Linda Grant about novelists. And my question is, why should we believe novelists more than journalists? having just read Ian McEwan's Solar. Now, he's a literary chap, but there's a lot of alleged scientific information in this book, huge chunks of it. I haven't the faintest idea whether it's true or not. Thank you.
Well, when I say believing novelists, I wasn't really talking about whether the information they give you is factually correct. That's not what I meant at all. But I think that it is in the novel, in certain kinds of novel, where it starts to interrogate, to examine the human dimension of the moral choices that we make, and to show that people are not these kind of cartoon, tabloid, or even Guardian characters. I mean, if you read somebody like George Monbiot, for example, you know, there is an equally kind of cartoonish world of good and evil, and it's in great literature that that is pulled away, and you start to see the human complexity of people. I will speak for myself and blow, you know, a small peep on the trumpet. I wrote a novel which was based on Peter Rachman, the Islam landlord. It was based on a figure like him, and I remember when I was doing the research, there was a cutting from the Evening Standard in which the woman said she had seen Peter Rachman through the window of a car, and she said, "I saw the face of evil." And you know, this is an absolute kind of classic cliche phrase. The interesting thing about Rachman is he was a Holocaust survivor. And so the question that I was asking in this novel is, why does suffering not ennoble? Why do we expect that suffering ennobles? And much journalism, particularly on foreign affairs, and particularly on the Middle East, for example, is predicated on the notion suffering ought to ennoble. If you're a victim, then obviously you're going to be a wonderful person. And what the novel can do is to completely, you know, attack that and say this is rubbish.
I don't think we should necessarily trust novelists more than journalists or the other way around. But what is interesting is that readers seem to look to writers now and to look to literary festivals for the exchange of political ideas.
Sorry. At the back there, yes.
A comment and a question. Obviously, individuals have a choice if they want to abandon news international publications and buy The Guardian. They've got a free choice in that situation. But we all need to have gas and electricity, and with the monopolisation of these facilities, we've got far less choice, even in the market. But my question is, with an ageing population, is there a language that will appeal to an electorate between the ages of 18 and 90? Because obviously comprehension across that age spectrum is likely to be very different.
The lessons of advanced marketing, so far as I understand, are that there is no such language, and that you must divide your market, so to speak, into different groups, a kaleidoscope of different groups. And you will need different words, different ideas, and different language for different groups. And any attempt to address absolutely everybody all at once is doomed. That's the conventional wisdom in marketing. I think there's a good deal of truth in it, or it wouldn't be selling products or sometimes politics as well as it does. But never forget that, at least in a time of crisis, someone like Winston Churchill who was also a great propagandist and a great manipulator of language, but nevertheless did seem to be able to speak to almost everybody.
And can I just say Obama?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
During his election campaign, I remember, I think it was the morning he was elected almost, turning on the radio and lying in bed and wondering what it was that was on my face. It was tears. I was lying on my back and they were running out of my eyes with just this most marvellous emotion and hopefully genuine.
But in the run-up to the election, he won that election because he very, very cleverly divided his market, and he found a language to talk to young people, particularly through music. So he was using YouTube videos to speak directly to people who had never voted before. Yeah, he found a language to talk to people under the age of 30, and it was through rap.
And then Gordon Brown tried.
Just one question. I've got a feeling this conversation this morning is a bit out of date.
Should be.
It is out of date. And I say this for one reason, that I attended a dinner in London a few weeks back where a prominent Chinese businessman, who was very close to the Chinese government, was discussing China today. And the question arose about free press and about the persecution of political people and things like this. And the question was, what is the biggest worry that China is facing? And the question came back very clearly answered by the fact that this guy said, the biggest problem considered by the Chinese government at the moment is social media. The social media. It is out of control. We cannot control it. And it's bigger than all the accepted organs of the press and the politics and so on.
What good news for the Chinese?
Yes.
And also what good news for the Arab nations as well.
Yes.
No, I think I was told by my publisher about a year ago, you have to go on Twitter and comment. I'm not actually interested in what Stephen Fry's had for breakfast. But a quite remarkable thing happened during the student protests. Several friends of mine had children who were on that demonstration, were actually in the kettle. And while I was watching the news, these were people I knew, were saying, I got a text or I got a phone call or here's a tweet from my child who is inside this situation, and they're saying that what's being reported on the news is not true. I mean, that was a remarkable piece of newsmaking, although offset, of course, by the famous Syrian lesbian who wasn't, which the rest of the media was completely taken in by.
Good. Matthew, yes.
Could I just draw a couple of threads together
Yes.
by quoting a tweet that I read myself from Philip Cowley, the political scientist, relating to all this phone hacking stuff. He said, there ought to be a phrase in the English language for the shock and indignation felt by the confirmation of something that everybody already suspected.
Well, I'm going to draw things to a close now, and first of all, thank you for your excellent questions. We know at the festival that we can always rely on Buxton audiences to ask good questions. You have done again today. And also to thank the panelists, who I did say they were going to be good, didn't I? And I think I was right about that. I was probably wrong about everything else. You plainly think I was wrong about most other things I said, but I wasn't wrong about that. And I want especially to thank Mark and Colette, who stood in for today's panel at extremely short notice, like last night.